Kidnapped alien princess falls in love with human rescuer. The city was alive with lights that sparkled like stars, reflecting off the tall glass buildings that seemed to touch the sky. People moved quickly along the streets, some heading home, some rushing to meet friends, and some simply enjoying the warmth of the evening. Among them was the young woman everyone called the princess. She wasn't a real princess, of course, but because of her high position in her family and her status in the business world, people treated her like royalty. Her life was full of comfort, luxury, and attention, but behind the smiles and elegance, she felt trapped. She wanted freedom, but her life rarely allowed her to step outside the rules and expectations that surrounded her. That evening, she had gone to a charity event, one she had attended many times before. The event hall was decorated beautifully, with soft golden lights and elegant tables covered in white cloth. There was laughter and music, and she wore a simple yet stunning dress that made her stand out without being too flashy. She moved through the crowd with grace, greeting people and offering smiles. Yet beneath her polite expressions, there was a quiet tension. She had a feeling that something unusual was going to happen, though she didn't know what. Outside, the streets were busy, and the evening air carried the scent of blooming flowers from nearby gardens. A small group of people lingered near the entrance, seemingly waiting for someone. They looked normal at first glance, but there was something in their eyes that made them seem out of place. They were watching her, and they were patient, like predators waiting for the perfect moment. As the event went on, the princess didn't notice them. She was busy shaking hands, taking pictures, and listening politely to the conversations around her. The crowd was dense, and people moved around her, laughing and chatting. She felt a strange sense of being both invisible and visible at the same time. Everyone saw her, but no one really noticed her feelings. She thought of leaving early, but her responsibilities held her in place. She smiled at another guest and nodded politely, unaware that danger was quietly approaching. Suddenly, a distraction occurred near the entrance. A loud crash echoed from outside, followed by shouts. People turned to see what had happened, their curiosity pulling them toward the doors. The princess hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to follow the crowd or stay inside. She felt a sudden chill run down her spine. Something about the noise did not feel natural. It felt forced, intentional. Before she could move, she felt a strong hand grab her arm. She tried to pull away, but it was too late. Another hand covered her mouth, silencing her scream. The chaos outside hid the quiet struggle. No one immediately noticed the young woman being pulled toward a waiting vehicle. The men who had grabbed her were strong and careful, experienced in what they were doing. She kicked and struggled, but her efforts were futile. Her heart raced, pounding against her chest like a drum. She tried to remember every lesson she had learned in self-defense, but fear clouded her mind. She was trapped, alone in a moving car with people who had no intention of letting her go. Meanwhile, miles away, a man sat in a small office filled with maps, computers, and surveillance monitors. His life had always been different from hers. He had once been in the military, trained to face danger and act under pressure. After leaving the service, he had chosen a quieter life, working as a private security consultant. But he still had a reputation for solving difficult cases and rescuing people from dangerous situations. That evening, he received a call that changed everything. A wealthy family had reported that their daughter had gone missing during a public event. The situation was delicate, and they feared for her life. The man immediately began to gather information. He asked questions, checked the city's traffic cameras, and reviewed the routes from the event hall. His mind worked quickly, analyzing every detail. He knew the kidnappers would try to be clever, but experience had taught him that most people made mistakes when under pressure. He noticed small things: the unusual behavior of people near the event, the quiet steps of those who did not belong, and the sudden gaps in security cameras at the moment the incident had occurred. Every clue mattered. Back in the vehicle, the princess tried to calm herself. She realized that panic would not help her think clearly. She looked at her surroundings, trying to remember details about the men, the car, and the streets. She noticed the faint hum of the engine, the shadows moving past the windows, and the faint smell of leather and metal. She began to quietly assess her situation, looking for anything she could use to escape. Fear was still there, but determination began to take its place. She knew she had to survive, to stay alive until help arrived. The kidnappers spoke quietly to each other, discussing their plans. They thought she was scared, weak, and easy to control. But they underestimated her. She listened carefully to every word, noticing contradictions and hesitations. She realized that not everything they said could be trusted. Her mind, trained by years of education and careful observation, began to work despite the fear. She started to plan small moves, trying to figure out how she might create an opportunity to escape. At the same time, the rescuer had already located the vehicle. Using his tracking equipment and knowledge of the city streets, he determined its likely path. He contacted local authorities, but decided not to wait for their slow coordination. He knew he would need to act quickly. Time was critical. He put on his jacket, checked his equipment, and moved toward the vehicle. His mind was calm but focused. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. He understood the stakes, and he knew that a wrong step could cost the young woman her life. Inside the car, the princess continued to watch and listen. She noticed small things: the way the men moved their hands, the sound of the car tires on the road, and the pauses in their conversation. She realized that these small details could help her predict their next move. Though fear was strong, she also felt a spark of hope. She was not alone. Somewhere out there, someone was looking for her, and she would not give up without a fight. The journey seemed to take forever, each second stretching as she felt the car turn into side streets and narrow alleys. She remembered stories she had read about courage and survival. Though she was in danger, she refused to let herself be defeated by fear. She practiced slow, controlled breathing, reminding herself to stay calm, to stay alert, and to keep her mind sharp. Every movement, every sound, every glance out the window was part of her observation. She was learning about her captors even as they thought she was helpless. Meanwhile, the rescuer had parked a short distance away and began to follow the vehicle on foot, careful not to be seen. He analyzed every route and every potential obstacle. He anticipated the kidnapper's actions, planning how he could intervene without putting the young woman in more danger. His heart did not race. His mind remained steady. This was what he had trained for, what he had lived for. He had faced danger before, but each rescue carried a different challenge. Each person he saved depended on him to act correctly and quickly. As the vehicle turned into an isolated warehouse district, the princess noticed a slight change in the men's behavior. One of them seemed nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if sensing something. She felt a small surge of hope. Perhaps someone was close, tracking them, ready to intervene. She kept her ears open and her eyes sharp. She would wait for the right moment, and when it came, she would act. Fear had not left her, but it had transformed into cautious determination. The kidnappers finally arrived at an abandoned building, their plan unfolding as they prepared to take her inside. The princess silently memorized the surroundings: the broken windows, the crates stacked in corners, the narrow exits, and the shadows that could hide someone. She realized that knowledge was power, and in this moment she had more knowledge than they realized. Outside, the rescuer had identified the building from satellite maps and street layouts. He knew he needed to enter carefully without alarming the kidnappers. He called a colleague quietly, explaining the situation and asking for backup if necessary, though he preferred to act first. His instincts told him that timing was critical. If he delayed, the kidnappers might move the young woman again, making the rescue much harder. Inside, the princess sat quietly, pretending to be frightened and compliant while her mind raced. She noticed small cracks in the kidnappers' plan and prepared herself to use them. She had no weapons, but she had her wits, her observation skills, and her courage. She reminded herself that someone was out there, someone who cared enough to risk everything to find her. As evening turned into night, the tension in the warehouse grew. The kidnappers were focused on their plan, unaware that help was very close. The princess felt her heart beat faster, but it was no longer only fear. It was hope, the first real hope she had felt since being taken. She trusted that someone would come, that someone would not let her down. She did not know who it was yet, but she believed in the possibility of rescue. And outside, in the shadows of the empty streets, the rescuer moved carefully, every sense alert, every step planned. He knew the young woman's life depended on his actions. He felt a quiet resolve settle over him, a certainty that he would not fail. Whatever it took, he would bring her back safely, and in that determination he found his purpose once again. In that moment, the story of fear, courage, and hope began. The princess, trapped yet brave, and the rescuer, determined and skilled, were about to cross paths in a way that would change both their lives forever. The warehouse was quiet except for the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional low murmur of voices. Inside, the young woman sat on a wooden crate, her eyes scanning every corner of the building. She noticed shadows stretching across the walls, piles of crates stacked unevenly, and broken windows that let the cold night air creep in. Fear was still there, but it had become sharper, more focused. She knew she could not panic. If she gave in to panic, she would lose the chance to survive. She needed to wait, observe, and act when the moment was right. Outside, the rescuer crouched behind a stack of crates near the edge of the building. The dim streetlights gave him enough light to see the entrance, but not enough for the kidnappers to notice him. His breathing was calm, steady. His military training had taught him how to control fear, how to think clearly under pressure. Tonight, all of that training mattered. Every movement, every step, every decision could mean the difference between life and death for the young woman inside. He observed the building, noting every detail he could see from his position. One of the kidnappers was pacing nervously, glancing over his shoulder as if sensing something was wrong. The other two were inside, moving crates and speaking in low tones, discussing their next steps. The rescuer watched quietly, calculating the best way to approach the situation. He knew he needed to act carefully. A wrong step, a sudden noise, and the young woman could be put in even greater danger. Inside the warehouse, the princess continued to observe. She saw the nervous movements of the men and noticed that their attention was divided. They underestimated her, assuming she was too frightened or weak to notice anything. But she was not weak. She had survived difficult moments before, though never like this. Her life of comfort had not prepared her for danger, but her mind was sharp, and she was learning quickly. She listened carefully, paying attention to every word, every sound, every change in the room. The first sign of hope came when she heard a faint noise near one of the broken windows. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then she noticed movement in the shadows. Someone was outside, observing the building. Her heart leapt with cautious hope. Could it be a rescuer? Could someone have found her? She did not know yet, but she felt a spark of relief. The feeling was almost overwhelming after hours of fear and uncertainty. The rescuer had found the perfect position. From the shadows, he could see the interior of the warehouse through the broken windows. He watched the young woman, noting her movements and her alertness. She was calm despite the situation, showing courage that impressed him silently. He admired her focus and her ability to think clearly even under extreme stress. He made a mental note. She was intelligent, strong, and brave. She was worth saving, and he would do everything in his power to bring her back safely. He checked his equipment one last time. A small radio allowed him to communicate with his colleague nearby, ready to provide backup if necessary. He adjusted his gloves and took a deep breath, preparing to move closer. The night was still, the air heavy with anticipation. Every second felt like an eternity, but he remained patient. He knew that rushing in recklessly would put the young woman at risk. Precision and timing were more important than speed. Inside, the princess's mind was working on her own plan. She realized that she could use the distractions and nervous behavior of the kidnappers to her advantage. If she could create a small moment of confusion, she might be able to move closer to an exit or attract the attention of the person outside. She did not panic. Instead, she focused on the possibilities, analyzing every detail she had observed. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had transformed into careful determination. The first step of the plan began when one of the kidnappers moved toward a crate that had shifted slightly. She acted quickly, pretending to stumble and fall, making a noise that drew the attention of the men. One of them cursed under his breath, moving toward her to check if she was okay. At that exact moment, the rescuer took his first careful step toward the entrance, staying low and silent. He needed to coordinate perfectly with her movements. Timing was everything. The young woman's heart pounded as she continued her careful performance. She pretended to trip and call out softly, drawing the men further away from the area where the window was broken. Her plan was risky, but she had no choice. She had to create the opportunity for escape, however small it might be. Every movement was calculated, every sound intentional. She was no longer a passive victim. She was taking control in the only way she could. The rescuer moved closer, his eyes never leaving the building. He could see the young woman through the window, her movements precise and deliberate. He adjusted his position to stay out of sight, ensuring that the kidnappers did not notice him. He admired her courage silently. She was acting with bravery that most people could not summon in such a situation. He felt a growing sense of respect and responsibility. He would not fail her. Inside the warehouse, the kidnappers were momentarily distracted. The young woman used this moment to move toward a stack of crates that provided a partial cover. She crouched low, making herself as small as possible while maintaining her focus on the broken window. She had memorized the path from the window to the nearest safe point outside. Every step had to be careful, precise, and timed perfectly with the rescuer's movements. The rescuer saw her begin to move and took the next step forward. He stayed low, silent, and ready to act. The tension was thick, but his training kept him calm. He knew that rushing or panicking could ruin everything. He watched her movements, ready to intervene if the kidnappers noticed her. The moment required perfect coordination and patience, and he had both in abundance. As the young woman reached the window, she paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. She could see the outside world, the street lights, and the shadows where help was waiting. She felt a mix of fear and hope, knowing that this was her chance. The rescuer, positioned perfectly in the shadows, was ready to act if anything went wrong. They were connected in a silent understanding, though they had not spoken yet. Their coordination depended on trust, courage, and observation. She climbed carefully through the broken window, avoiding the sharp edges and moving as quietly as possible. Her heart raced, but she kept her mind focused on each step. The rescuer watched intently, ready to intervene if needed. One of the kidnappers noticed a movement and began to turn, but the young woman was already outside, moving quickly toward the shadowed area where the rescuer was waiting. The kidnappers shouted in alarm, realizing that she had escaped. The rescuer reacted instantly, moving toward the young woman and pulling her into the shadows. She followed his lead without hesitation, trusting him in that moment, though she did not yet know who he was. He led her quietly through narrow alleys and behind abandoned buildings, keeping her safe from the kidnappers who were now in pursuit. They moved with speed and caution, navigating the streets with knowledge of every possible hiding spot. The young woman noticed how calm and precise he was, even under extreme pressure. He did not panic, he did not rush, and he never let fear control him. She began to feel a strange sense of relief and trust. This man was not only skilled, but also careful and thoughtful. He cared about her safety, and that care was evident in every movement he made. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached a safe location, a small, quiet street far from the warehouse. The young woman paused, catching her breath and looking around. She realized that she was free, thanks to the bravery and skill of the man beside her. She felt a mixture of gratitude, relief, and admiration. She did not know him well yet, but she trusted him already. The rescuer checked the area carefully, ensuring that no one was following them. He then turned to the young woman, offering a reassuring smile. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "But we need to keep moving until we are completely out of danger." His voice was calm, steady, and filled with confidence. She nodded, silently agreeing to follow him. She had no choice but to trust him, and in that moment she did. As they moved toward a safer location, the young woman began to notice small details about the man. His calm demeanor, his careful movements, and his sharp awareness impressed her. She realized that this was not just someone trained to fight or chase. This was someone who could think clearly under pressure, someone who could be relied upon in life-and-death situations. A quiet admiration began to grow inside her, though she did not yet understand it fully. The rescuer, on the other hand, observed her closely. He noticed her alertness, her intelligence, and her courage. She was no passive victim. She was thinking, planning, and surviving. He respected her for that, though he said nothing aloud. He knew that words were not needed yet. Their actions, their coordination, and their trust in each other spoke more than words could. By the time they reached the temporary safe location, both were exhausted but aware that the night was far from over. They had survived the first step, the escape, but the dangers were not gone. The young woman sat quietly, still catching her breath, while the rescuer checked the surroundings once more. Silence settled over the area, broken only by the distant sounds of the city. For the first time since the kidnapping, the young woman allowed herself a small moment of relief. She was safe, at least for now, thanks to the courage and skill of the man who had rescued her. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and perhaps something more, something she did not yet name. She realized that she had begun to trust him, even admire him, and that trust was growing stronger with every passing moment. The rescuer watching her felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had trained for moments like this, yet each rescue was different. Each person had their own strength, courage, and personality. This young woman was remarkable. He felt a responsibility not only to protect her physically, but to help her feel safe emotionally. That realization deepened his commitment. He would not fail her. As the night continued, both of them remained alert but slowly began to relax. They shared a quiet understanding, a bond that had formed without words. Both knew that their journey was not over, that dangers still lay ahead. But in that moment, they had taken the first step together towards safety and trust. After the night of escape, the young woman and the rescuer found themselves in a small, quiet house on the outskirts of the city. The place was simple but secure, with a few rooms, a sturdy door, and windows that could be locked from the inside. The rescuer had arranged for it in advance, a safe location where no one could find them easily. The house was empty except for basic furniture, a sofa, a small table, a bed, and a few chairs, but that simplicity was comforting. It was not luxurious, but it was safe, and that was all that mattered now. The young woman sat on the sofa, her hands folded nervously in her lap. She had just gone through one of the scariest experiences of her life, and though she was safe, she could not stop thinking about what had happened. Her heart still raced, and her mind replayed the events in her head over and over. She thought about the kidnappers, about how close she had come to danger, and about the man who had saved her. She realized, with a mix of gratitude and curiosity, that she had trusted him without hesitation. That trust was unusual for her. She rarely trusted anyone so quickly. The rescuer moved quietly around the room, checking the locks on the doors and windows. He placed a small lamp on the table and dimmed it to a soft glow. Then he returned to sit near her, careful not to crowd her space. His presence was steady and reassuring, and she found herself relaxing slightly in his calmness. She realized that she had been tense and alert all night, but now, with him near, she felt a small sense of security that she had not felt in a long time. "You're safe now," he said quietly, not as a command, but as a statement. "No one can get to you here. We'll stay as long as we need." His voice was calm, measured, and kind, and she felt herself respond to it. She nodded, unsure if she could speak just yet. Words seemed small compared to the relief she felt, the knowledge that she was alive and no longer alone. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the wooden floor. The young woman's mind wandered back to the warehouse, to the fear and tension she had felt, and to the man who had guided her out. She remembered how calm he had been, how focused, and how every movement seemed precise and careful. She began to admire him, though she did not yet understand the depth of that feeling. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "How did you find me?" she asked. There was no accusation in her tone, only genuine curiosity. The question had been on her mind since the moment she realized someone had been tracking the kidnappers. She wanted to understand, to know how someone could act so quickly and effectively to save her. The rescuer leaned back slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "I have experience with situations like this," he said simply. "I've been trained to observe, track, and plan. When I received the call, I knew time was critical. I had to act fast." He paused, then added, "But you helped too. You stayed calm, observed carefully, and made your own choices. That made the rescue possible." Her eyes widened slightly at his words. She had never thought of herself as capable in dangerous situations. She had relied on others for protection most of her life. But now she realized that her own presence of mind had mattered. She had contributed, even in a small way, to her survival. That thought gave her a sense of strength she had never felt before. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. The rescuer observed her carefully, noting her alertness, her intelligence, and her cautious curiosity. He felt a quiet admiration for her bravery. Most people he knew would have panicked completely in that situation. She had not only survived, but had participated actively in her escape. That resilience impressed him more than words could express. The young woman broke the silence again, this time with a question that surprised even herself. "Why do you do this?" "Risk your life for strangers?" she asked. There was genuine curiosity in her voice, mixed with admiration. She wanted to understand the man who had saved her, to know why someone would act so selflessly. The rescuer looked at her, his eyes calm but serious. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because I know what it's like to be in danger, to feel powerless. I don't want anyone to feel that way if I can prevent it. And because, sometimes, helping someone gives you a purpose that nothing else can." He paused, then added softly, "It's not about reward or recognition. It's about knowing that someone's life is safe because of what I do." The young woman felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had expected answers filled with pride or self-interest, but instead, she heard honesty and care. She realized that his courage was not only physical but also emotional. He had chosen to act not for fame, not for money, but because he believed it was the right thing to do. That realization made her respect him even more deeply. As the night wore on, they began to talk more freely. She shared small details about her life, about the pressures she faced, and about her feelings of isolation despite the luxury and attention that surrounded her. She spoke of the constant expectations, the lack of privacy, and the loneliness that came with her position. Her voice was quiet, reflective, and honest. The rescuer listened carefully, never interrupting, only occasionally asking gentle questions to understand better. He shared a few stories of his own, not about danger or heroics, but about times when he had felt alone or uncertain, when his choices had carried weight, and when he had had to rely on his own judgment. His words were simple but filled with experience, and she found herself drawn to them. She realized that this man who had risked so much to save her was also human, with his own vulnerabilities and experiences. Over the next several hours, a bond began to form between them. It was quiet and subtle at first, expressed in small gestures rather than words. The rescuer offered her water and food, ensuring she ate something before she grew weak from fear and exhaustion. He adjusted a blanket around her shoulders when she shivered from the cold night air. She noticed these acts of care, these small moments of attentiveness, and felt a growing sense of trust. Trust, she realized, was not something she had given lightly. Most of her life, people had expected her to trust them simply because of her position or status. But this was different. She had seen his courage, his honesty, and his patience. She had experienced his calmness in a dangerous situation. She had watched him act without hesitation to protect her life. That combination of qualities made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. The rescuer, too, began to notice more about her. He admired her intelligence, her careful observation, and her courage under pressure. She had not panicked, had not relied solely on him, but had actively participated in her own rescue. That strength of character impressed him more than anything else. He began to feel a quiet sense of respect, followed by something deeper, an interest, a desire to know her better beyond the dangerous circumstances that had brought them together. As the hours passed, the conversation grew lighter. They spoke about ordinary things, the city, favorite foods, hobbies, and memories from childhood. These simple topics created a sense of normalcy, a momentary escape from the trauma of the previous night. She laughed quietly at some of his stories, and he smiled at her reactions. The sound of her laughter was like a small light in the room, breaking the tension that had lingered since the kidnapping. At one point, she noticed how carefully he watched her, not in a way that felt intrusive, but in a way that showed concern and attentiveness. She felt a strange sense of comfort, knowing that someone was watching over her, not with judgment, but with care. It was a feeling she had rarely experienced in her life, and it made her heart feel lighter. The night passed slowly but peacefully. They took turns resting, always aware that danger could still exist outside, but trusting in the safety of the place they had found. She slept fitfully, but the presence of the rescuer nearby made her feel secure. He, too, rested lightly, always alert but allowing himself small moments of calm, knowing that the immediate danger had passed. By the morning, a sense of quiet relief had settled over the house. The young woman felt more grounded, more in control of her emotions. She realized that she had survived not only because of the rescuer's skill, but also because of her own courage and careful thinking. That realization gave her a sense of strength and independence she had not felt before. The rescuer prepared a simple breakfast, and they ate together quietly. The meal was modest, bread, fruit, and tea, but the act of sharing it created a sense of normality. They spoke in gentle tones, slowly, carefully, learning more about each other with each passing word. Trust continued to grow, forming the foundation of a connection that neither had anticipated but both recognized. As they sat together, the young woman realized that her fear was no longer the central force in her thoughts. It had been replaced by curiosity, admiration, and an emerging sense of care for the man who had saved her. She was beginning to feel something she had not expected, a connection that went beyond gratitude, a desire to know him better as a person, not just as a rescuer. The rescuer noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor as well. He saw her growing more relaxed, more open, and more engaged in conversation. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she was safe and beginning to feel at ease. He also realized that he was drawn to her, not just because of the danger she had faced, but because of her courage, intelligence, and spirit. By the end of the day, the house felt less like a temporary refuge and more like a place where trust and understanding could grow. They were no longer just rescuer and rescued. They were two people who had shared an intense, life-changing experience and had begun to see each other as more than strangers. A bond was forming, delicate but strong, built on courage, care, and shared experience. In that quiet house on the outskirts of the city, the young woman and the rescuer began to understand something important. Life was unpredictable, often frightening, and sometimes cruel. But courage, trust, and compassion could create moments of safety and connection even in the darkest times. They had found that in each other, and that discovery was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could have anticipated, yet both would embrace fully. Days passed in the quiet house on the outskirts of the city. The young woman began to feel a sense of normalcy she had not experienced in a long time. The constant fear that had dominated her life since the kidnapping was fading, replaced by curiosity, gratitude, and a subtle sense of comfort. She moved around the house more freely now, exploring the small kitchen, sitting by the window to watch the quiet street, and noticing the small details she had overlooked before. Every object, every sound, every shadow became part of a world that was safe, even if only for a short while. The rescuer remained vigilant, of course. He watched the streets from the windows, made small checks around the house, and stayed alert to any sign of danger. But he also allowed himself moments of calm, moments when he could sit with the young woman and speak with her without the immediate pressure of threat. These moments were small, yet meaningful. They shared meals, discussed everyday things, and began to learn about each other beyond the circumstances that had brought them together. One morning, as the sun rose and cast a warm light across the room, the young woman found herself smiling quietly at a small detail. The way the light reflected off the table, the way the wind moved the curtains, the sound of birds outside. She realized that she had not noticed these simple, peaceful moments in a long time. The rescuer watched her from across the room, noting the change in her demeanor. She was beginning to relax, to reclaim parts of herself that fear had hidden. He felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his presence had allowed her to feel this way. "Do you ever just sit and enjoy the quiet?" she asked softly, her eyes still on the window. The rescuer nodded. "Sometimes," he said. "It's rare, though. Life often keeps you moving, thinking, planning, but moments like this, they remind you why you fight for peace." She turned to look at him, noticing for the first time the quiet intensity in his eyes. There was a depth there, a seriousness mixed with patience and understanding. She felt a strange pull toward him, a curiosity that went beyond gratitude. She wanted to know more about him, about the life he had lived, about the choices he had made. She realized that she was drawn not just to his skill and courage, but to the way he seemed to see the world, calm, observant, and thoughtful. As the days went on, their conversations became longer and more personal. The young woman shared stories of her childhood, of the pressures she had faced growing up in a family with high expectations, of the loneliness that often accompanied her status. She spoke of the times she had felt trapped by the life she led, of the desire to experience freedom and independence. Her voice was quiet, reflective, and honest. The rescuer listened without interruption, offering gentle encouragement when appropriate. He shared a few stories of his own, moments from his past that revealed his own struggles, his own moments of fear, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke not to impress her, but to connect, to show that courage did not mean the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She listened, fascinated, realizing that his strength was not just physical but emotional as well. One afternoon, while preparing a simple meal together, they began to notice the small rhythms of life. She chopped vegetables while he stirred a pot, their movements coordinated without speaking. There was a quiet comfort in the shared task, a sense of teamwork that felt natural and safe. She realized that these simple moments, cooking, laughing quietly at a mistake, sharing stories, were helping her heal in a way she had not expected. "You're very organized," she said suddenly, glancing at him as he measured ingredients carefully. He smiled faintly. "I have to be," he replied. "Life doesn't always give you time to fix mistakes. Planning and preparation matter." She nodded, considering his words. "It's more than that," she said softly. "It's careful, thoughtful. You think about everything before you act." He looked at her, seeing not just observation but admiration in her eyes. "Experience teaches you that," he said. "And sometimes, caring about someone else forces you to be even more careful." Her heart skipped slightly at his words. She realized that he was not speaking abstractly, he meant it. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of connection that was growing stronger with each passing day. She had survived the danger, but now she was discovering something more, the comfort of being understood and cared for by someone who had proven himself trustworthy. As the evening fell, they sat by the window, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. The city lights began to flicker on, creating a quiet glow that filled the room. She leaned back, letting herself relax, and noticed how natural it felt to be near him. There was no fear, no tension, only a sense of safety and calm. She realized that she had come to rely on his presence, not just for protection, but for emotional support. "I never expected to feel this," she admitted quietly, her voice almost a whisper. He looked at her, curious and gentle. "This," he asked. "This peace, safety, comfort, even happiness," she said, glancing at him briefly before looking back at the window. He nodded slowly, understanding her meaning. "It's hard to find those things in life," he said. "But when you do, you hold on to them, you appreciate them." The young woman felt a flutter in her chest at his words. She realized that she was beginning to see him as more than a rescuer. She admired his courage and skill, yes, but she also admired his patience, his thoughtfulness, and the quiet strength that he carried. She felt drawn to him in a way that went beyond gratitude. It was respect, curiosity, and something deeper she could not yet name. Over the next several days, their bond continued to grow. They shared meals, explored the small surrounding area carefully, and spent long hours talking. She began to notice the small things about him, the way he moved, the way he observed details, the way he listened without judgment. Each observation strengthened her trust and admiration. She realized that she could speak openly with him, share her thoughts and feelings without fear, and that he would understand. One day, as they walked along a quiet path near the house, she asked a question that had been on her mind. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked. He looked at her, considering his answer. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I've learned to be comfortable with it, and I've learned that moments like this, moments of connection, make life meaningful." She felt a warmth at his words, a sense of closeness she had never felt before. She realized that she was beginning to care for him in a way that went beyond admiration. She cared about his thoughts, his feelings, his safety, and his well-being. She began to notice when he looked tired, when he seemed worried, and she wanted to help, to support him as he had supported her. The rescuer, too, began to notice the changes in her. He saw her growing more confident, more relaxed, and more open. He admired her courage and intelligence, and he felt a growing sense of attachment. He realized that he cared about her not just as someone he had rescued, but as a person he wanted to know better, someone whose life mattered deeply to him. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the small living room, the young woman spoke softly. "I never imagined that someone could care so much for a stranger," she said. He looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "Caring doesn't always depend on knowing someone for a long time," he said. "Sometimes it's about seeing who they are and knowing that they matter. That's enough to act." Her heart swelled at his words. She realized that she had been craving this kind of connection her entire life. A person who saw her for who she was, who cared for her not because of her status or position, but because of her courage, intelligence, and humanity. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and something more, a connection that was growing stronger each day. As the days continued, they faced small challenges together. A delivery truck passing too close, a sudden storm, a minor noise outside. Each situation required coordination and mutual understanding. Through these small experiences, their trust deepened. They learned to rely on each other, to anticipate each other's actions, and to communicate silently when necessary. Their bond became a quiet, unspoken partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The young woman began to notice her own strength in ways she had never realized before. She had faced danger and survived. She had made careful decisions, observed her surroundings, and acted with courage. And now she was learning to navigate life with someone she trusted, someone who respected her abilities and valued her as a person. She felt a sense of empowerment that was new and exhilarating. The rescuer noticed her growing confidence as well. He admired the way she moved, spoke, and thought. He felt proud not only of her survival but of her strength and intelligence. He realized that their connection was deepening beyond circumstance. It was mutual respect, understanding, and emotional closeness. He began to think about her not just as someone he had rescued, but as someone he cared for deeply. One evening, as they prepared a simple dinner together, the young woman spoke quietly, almost hesitantly. "I feel safe with you, not just physically, but everything. I can think, I can breathe, I can be myself." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "That's how it should be," he said. "Everyone deserves to feel that way, and you deserve it more than most." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She realized that her feelings for him were growing stronger, that trust and admiration were transforming into something deeper. She did not yet know how to define it, but she felt it clearly. A connection that was rare and precious, built on courage, care, and shared experience. As the night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, they sat quietly by the window, reflecting on the past days. They had survived danger, faced fear, and discovered strength within themselves and in each other. Their bond had grown stronger with each shared experience, each conversation, each quiet moment. They were no longer just rescuer and rescued. They were companions, allies, and increasingly something more. In that quiet house, the young woman and the rescuer had found something rare and precious: trust, understanding, and the beginnings of a deep emotional connection. It was a connection built not on circumstance alone, but on courage, care, and the willingness to see and support each other fully. And both of them knew, even without saying it aloud, that their journey together was only beginning.